I didn't mention my mom in my dad's obituary. Not once. No, beloved wife, no, grieving widow, not even a passing line. Just erased her. People lost their minds. They called. They texted. Some even showed up. Was it a mistake? Did you forget? No. I didn't forget. I made a decision. A very conscious, very sharp-edged decision. Because sometimes the only way to tell the truth is to carve it into silence. My dad passed on December 1, 2022. But really, I'd been watching him disappear for over a decade. It started slow. Little things, taking longer to get up from the couch, losing track of what day it was. His joints stiffened. His breath shortened. His once booming laugh got swallowed by wheezes. And still, he never asked for help. Not really. It was my mom who stepped in. Or pretended to. And I want you to imagine what that looks like, not someone swooping in with compassion, but someone circling, like a buzzard. She cooked, sure. Microwaved frozen dinners and left them half cold. She cleaned, if you count shoving clutter into closets and calling it good. She was there, technically. But presence isn't the same as care. And while he faded, she flourished. On Facebook. In DMs, talking to men she'd never met, laughing into her phone late at night while my father coughed himself to sleep. She swore she was divorced, separated, whatever word gave her cover. She said she was leaving him, soon. That she had someone waiting, out west. She never left. She just made sure he never fully lived. I begged him to come stay with me. For years. I had a spare room, a decent job, space, peace. But he wouldn't budge. He loved that house too much. Said he built it with his hands and he'd leave it the same way. I used to think that was stubbornness. Now I wonder if it was shame. If deep down, he thought he deserved the way she treated him. The day after Thanksgiving, he finally gave in. It was the first time he couldn't fake it. He looked at me with eyes that seemed almost embarrassed and said, "Okay. That's all." Just that word. Like surrender. I brought him home on hospice. I had to carry him up the porch steps myself. He weighed almost nothing by then. My arms shook, not from his weight, but from everything I was holding inside. The air in my apartment changed when he arrived. Like it knew. Time got heavy. The second stretched and twisted into hours that didn't feel real. I played his favorite records, made his toast exactly how he liked it, burnt on the edges, butter in the middle. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. He just looked at me with this quiet gratitude that hurt more than any scream. But of course, she came. Not to help. Not to say goodbye. She came to supervise. She walked in like it was still her domain. Hair done, nails painted, voice high and cheery like we were hosting a brunch. I watched her lean over his bed, fake a little sob, then check her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. She asked me about the life insurance policy before she asked me how he was feeling. She wanted his things before he was even gone. I'd made sure all the paperwork was airtight. I had durable power of attorney. I was on every account. Every bill. Every plan. My dad trusted me. Trusted me to protect him when he couldn't protect himself. But there was one thing I couldn't protect him from, her presence. Legally, the house was still hers too. She was still his wife. When he passed, I thought the hardest part was over. I was wrong. The funeral home needed her signature to approve the cremation. I was the one who made the arrangements, picked the urn, chose the music for the service. But they needed her consent. Like she had any right to decide what happened to him. She said no. Not out of grief. Out of spite. I stood there in that tiny, over-air-conditioned office with its beige walls and fake ficus plants, and I felt something boil. The funeral director looked at me with polite panic, unsure if he should say something. I clenched my fists under the table, took a deep breath, and I lied. I told her she could keep his survivor benefits. The Social Security ones. They were hers by law anyway, but I made it sound like a gift. She nodded, smug, like she'd won. Like she had leverage. It's funny. You grow up thinking adults are these wise, evolved beings. But some people just get older. That's it. No growth. No self-awareness. Just more years of the same rot. I went home and sat down to write his obituary. My hands hovered over the keyboard for a long time. How do you condense a life into a few paragraphs? How do you honor a man who lived quietly, worked hard, and died with grace? More importantly, how do you do it without letting a single drop of her poison into the words? I started typing. His name. His date of birth. His career. His hobbies. I wrote about his hands, how they were always stained with something, paint, soil, grease. I mentioned how he never missed a baseball game, even when he could barely sit up. I wrote about his stubborn kindness, the kind that never asked for thanks. But I didn't write about her. Not one word. Not survived by. Not loving wife. Not married to. She didn't deserve to be in his story. Not even in the footnotes. When the obituary ran, the calls started almost immediately. Where's your mom? Was there a mistake? Why didn't you mention her? And I told them the truth. Because for once, I wasn't afraid. I told them about the years she spent online, searching for other lives while my dad begged for her attention. I told them about how she let the house fall apart around him. How she left expired food in the fridge and forgot to refill his medication. How she was always just about to leave, but never did, because she liked the control too much. I told them everything. And what happened next was something I didn't expect. They believed me. Some were shocked. Some pretended to be. But you could hear it in their voices, that low, uneasy pause. The way people sound when a puzzle piece clicks into place. Like they'd always suspected something but never wanted to say it aloud. Suddenly, she wasn't the grieving widow anymore. She was just the woman who'd been left out. And that, more than anything, drove her mad. She started posting cryptic things online. Old wedding photos. Poems about betrayal. Passive-aggressive quotes about children who dishonor their parents. I ignored it. I'd already told a story that mattered. But silence only makes narcissists louder. She started calling extended family. Friends from church. Even people she hadn't spoken to in years. Spinning the narrative. Painting herself as the victim of a smear campaign launched by her ungrateful child. Some believed her. Most didn't. And I? I slept better than I had in years. But peace, I would soon learn, is never permanent. Because there are things I hadn't uncovered. Things I didn't know were still buried in that house. And once I went back. Once I stepped inside that quiet, rotting shell my father refused to leave. I found something that made me question whether I ever really knew either of them at all. I hadn't planned on going back. After everything, I figured I was done with that place. I told myself the memories were enough. But grief is strange. It doesn't move in straight lines. It loops. It scratches at the back of your mind when you think you've made peace. The week after the service, I found myself standing at the edge of the old driveway. The same one I used to rollerblade down as a kid, back when the cracks weren't so deep. The garage door was half open. Her car was gone. I told myself I was just there to pick up a few things, my dad's toolbox, his record player, maybe the old thermos he used to carry to work. But as I stepped onto the porch, my body froze. The air was different. Not colder. Not warmer. Just thick. Like the walls knew I didn't belong anymore. I'd been in that house 1,000 times. But that day, something was off. The door creaked open like it didn't recognize me. The light coming through the living room window looked yellowed and sick. And the silence, it wasn't peaceful. It was swollen. Like it was waiting for something to be said. I moved through the rooms like a stranger. The couch still had his dent in it. The blanket he always used was folded neatly over the armrest, untouched. Her things were everywhere. Shoes kicked off at the bottom of the stairs. A half-finished soda on the coffee table. But nothing of his. No photos. No glasses. No notes in his handwriting. It was like she'd scrubbed him out the second his body was gone. I went upstairs. My old room was still the same. Same faded posters. Same dent in the wall where I'd once thrown a book. But his room was sealed. She'd locked it. I tried the knob. It didn't budge. I knocked once, out of some weird form of politeness, maybe, but of course, there was no answer. So I picked the lock. With a credit card. Just like I used to when I got grounded. And when the door swung open, I felt it. The shift. The pull. Like I'd crossed some invisible line. The room was dark, even though the blinds were up. Dust floated in the air like ash. His bed was stripped bare. No pillows. No sheets. Just the mattress, stained and slumped in the middle. I stepped in carefully, like the floor might collapse under me. That's when I saw the box. It was tucked under his nightstand. A plain cardboard box sealed with brittle tape. It didn't look like much. But my name was written on top, in his handwriting. Sharp. Precise. Like he'd been holding the pen tightly. I sat on the floor and pulled it into my lap. Peeled the tape back slowly, like opening a wound. Inside were folders. Letters. Receipts. Photos. Some I recognized. Most I didn't. And then, at the very bottom, was a notebook. A black leather-bound one, the kind he used to carry when he worked maintenance jobs. I opened it. The first page was dated 3 years ago. The handwriting was shaky, but his. If you're reading this, then I'm gone. I didn't want to leave you with questions, but I know you. I know you won't let this rest. So here it is. Everything. I swallowed hard. My hands trembled as I flipped the page. Your mother isn't who she pretends to be. You already know some of it. But not all. I kept reading. Each page was another layer peeled back. Another wound reopened. He wrote about money, how accounts kept coming up short. How credit cards he never used were suddenly maxed out. How once, he came home from a hospital stay and found all his savings gone. She claimed it went to repairs. There were no repairs. He wrote about conversations he overheard, her telling someone over the phone that he wasn't going to last much longer, that she was just waiting it out. He wrote about waking up once in the middle of the night and finding her standing over him, just staring. Not moving. Just watching. But it was the final entry that hit me like a punch. There are things I never told you. About the early years. Before you were born. Things that don't make sense. Things that scared me then and scare me now. I didn't leave because I thought I was protecting you. Maybe I was wrong. If you find this, please, don't trust her. And whatever you do, don't let her in. That was it. The rest of the pages were blank. I sat there, notebook in hand, feeling like the ground beneath me wasn't solid anymore. Like nothing I knew was real. I looked around the room and felt him in every corner, and her in every shadow. I knew I had to leave. But I didn't. I went downstairs instead, still gripping that notebook like a lifeline. I needed answers. Proof. Something. That's when I saw it, on the hallway wall. A picture frame. New. Glossy. Hung too perfectly to be old. And inside, a photo I'd never seen before. It was my mom. Pregnant. Smiling. But she wasn't standing next to my dad. The man in the photo wasn't him. And suddenly the notebook wasn't the only thing trembling. I stood there frozen, staring at the frame like it might explain itself if I waited long enough. The man in the photo had dark, curly hair, a shadowed jaw, a smirk that didn't belong anywhere near her. His arm was wrapped around her waist in a way that looked too comfortable, too practiced. She was glowing, head tilted, cheeks flushed, both hands resting on her swollen belly. That belly was me. I reached up and pulled the frame off the wall. No date on the back. No writing. Nothing. It was like it had just appeared, dropped into the middle of a history I thought I understood. And suddenly, I couldn't breathe. I took the picture into the kitchen and laid it on the table beside the notebook. My father's words blurred on the page now, swimming with too many questions. Things I never told you. Don't trust her. I thought I was here for closure. I thought I knew what the damage was. But this? This was rot. Roots so deep I hadn't even seen them spreading. The drawer by the fridge was always where my mom kept old mail. I ripped it open, scattering years' worth of unopened envelopes and curled up coupons. Beneath a stack of old birthday cards, I found what I didn't know I was looking for, a manila envelope with frayed corners and one word scribbled in blue ink. Hospital. I opened it. Inside, discharge papers. From a maternity wing. A birth certificate. My name. My date of birth. Mother, her. Father, blank. I stared at the empty space, my heart thudding so hard I could barely hear the tick of the kitchen clock. There was no line through the box. No, not applicable. Just, nothing. The envelope held more. A second certificate. Not official. A paternity affidavit. Unfiled. Unsigned. A name I'd never seen before scribbled where the father should be, Daniel Price. I don't know how long I sat there. At some point I noticed the light outside had changed. The sky was bleeding into dusk. I should have left then. I should have taken the notebook and the envelope and gotten out. But instead, I did something I hadn't done since I was 13. I walked into their bedroom. It smelled like lavender and decay. Her perfume still lingered, cheap, sweet, almost syrupy. The bed was made too perfectly, like she hadn't slept there in weeks. On the nightstand was a glass paperweight she always claimed was from her honeymoon, next to a framed photo of me as a baby. But it wasn't the photo that caught my eye, it was the jewelry box. Wooden. Carved. Always locked when I was younger. This time it wasn't. Inside were rings. Bracelets. A folded-up note with dried-out lipstick on the corner. And underneath it all, a flash drive. Just a plain, black USB. No label. No clue what it held. I should have left it. But my hands moved on their own. Slipped it into my pocket. And that's when I heard it. The front door. Opening. Then closing. Footsteps. Heels. She was home. I didn't move. I couldn't. My body went stiff, like I'd stepped into ice water. The footsteps were steady, measured. Not rushed. Not surprised. Like she knew I was there. She always did have a way of showing up just when I was about to breathe. I heard her set something down on the kitchen counter. Keys. A purse. Then a pause. That pause went on too long. She was listening. I shoved the jewelry box drawer shut and slipped out of the bedroom, USB still in my pocket. I stepped out into the hallway just as she turned the corner. We stared at each other. She didn't even flinch. "Oh," she said, voice light, casual, too calm. "Didn't know you were stopping by." I felt my throat tighten. I didn't answer. She looked me up and down, then glanced at the envelope in my hand. The hospital papers. Her eyes barely flickered. Going through my things now? I held up the photo. "Who is he?" Her lips curved into a slow, lazy smile. "Someone I used to know. He's in a picture with you. Pregnant." With me. She didn't blink. You were planned, you know. Even if not everything else was. I felt like the air was being pulled out of the room. So you lied to Dad? My whole life? You let him think. I didn't let him think anything, she snapped, sharp now, like a switch flipped. He knew. Maybe not at first. But he figured it out. My voice dropped. And he stayed anyway. She shrugged, as if none of it mattered. He needed someone. I needed stability. We were convenient. Convenient? My hands clenched. You leeched off him. You let him rot in that house while you played single online and drained every dollar he had. She laughed, actually laughed. You always were dramatic. I took a step forward, notebook in hand. He wrote everything down. I know what you did. All of it. Her eyes narrowed. Then you know he wasn't exactly a saint either. What does that mean? She tilted her head. Ask yourself this. Why didn't he leave me? Why did he stay in a house with a woman he supposedly couldn't stand? Maybe he liked being the victim. Maybe he needed it. No, I said, quiet but certain. He stayed because he loved me. And he thought he was protecting me. She rolled her eyes. You've always needed someone to blame. No, I said again, louder. I needed a mother. And I never had one. Something in her face twitched then, just for a second. Like I'd struck a nerve. But she recovered quickly. You want to throw away your past, fine, she said, stepping toward me. But don't rewrite it just because it's easier to paint me the villain. You did that yourself, I said, voice shaking. And then I walked out. No slamming doors. No final words. Just quiet. I got in my car, locked the doors, and drove. I didn't go home. I pulled into a grocery store parking lot and sat there with my laptop and the flash drive. My hands trembled as I plugged it in. One folder. No name. Inside, videos. Dozens. Each with a timestamp. Some recent. Some from years ago. I clicked the oldest one. Static, at first. Then a handheld shot of the living room. My dad in the recliner. His hands limp at his sides. My mom pacing back and forth, yelling, words blurred by static, but her posture unmistakable. She was berating him. Shouting. At one point, she grabbed his chin, yanked it upward. His head bobbed like a rag doll. He didn't even resist. I clicked another file. A more recent one. She was sitting on the couch, talking into her phone. Her voice was clear this time. She was laughing. Yeah, he's still breathing, she said. Barely. I swear, he's dragging it out just to spite me. My stomach turned. I opened another. She was standing in the hallway mirror, adjusting her makeup. He's not gonna make it through the month, she said, like she was predicting the weather. Soon as the check hits, I'm gone. I slammed the laptop shut. The air in the car was thick and choking. I rolled down the windows, but it didn't help. Nothing helped. The truth was all there. And it made me feel sick. But beneath the nausea, beneath the anger, was something else. A kind of clarity. Like I'd been walking through fog for years and suddenly, painfully, the path was visible. I wasn't done yet. Not even close. Because if those files existed, then someone besides her must have seen them. Someone must have known. I drove home with the windows still down, the night air biting at my skin, but I barely felt it. My mind was locked on one thing, the videos. Not just what was in them, but why they existed. Who recorded them? It couldn't have been her. The angles, the way some of them were hidden, low to the ground or behind objects, they weren't filmed by someone showing off. They were watched. Surveillance. That word hit me somewhere deep in the chest. I got home just before midnight. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't shower. I just sat on the living room floor, laptop open again, staring at the file names. And then I noticed it. One of the video files had a different icon, something embedded. A note. Backup, RD, Garage Cam. Garage Cam? I hadn't seen a single security system in the house. No cameras, no monitors. My dad hated tech. He called smart speakers government bugs, and once took a hammer to a blinking router light because it looked suspicious. But then I remembered the day I brought him home on hospice. He made me move some old paint cans in the garage. Said they were blocking the vent. I didn't think anything of it at the time. I opened my phone and pulled up the garage photo I'd snapped by accident that day, just a quick shot of my dad's wheelchair as I wheeled him toward the steps. But in the top corner, barely visible in the shadow of a support beam, was a pinhole camera. Small. Old. Taped in place. He had been watching. I scrubbed through more of the footage. And slowly, I started to see the timeline. The entries in the notebook. The files on the drive. The camera. He hadn't just written it down. He documented everything. All of it. But the question still throbbed in my skull: why? Why record it if you're not going to use it? Unless, he couldn't. Or someone stopped him. There was one last file in the folder. Different name. Different format. A compressed zip file. Password protected. I tried everything: his birthday, my birthday, even lavender, which had been his safe word in physical therapy. Nothing worked. I wasn't ready to brute force it. Not yet. Instead, I opened the metadata on the video files. A few of them had been accessed by another device. Not hers. Not his. A laptop registered as HP, Ardrum. My heart skipped. RD. RD. My room at the house. I hadn't used a Hewlett-Packard anything since high school. But he had. He kept that old HP laptop in the upstairs linen closet, the one with the battery that only lasted 10 minutes and the fan that wheezed louder than the AC. I never thought much of it. Just old junk. But if those files were opened from that laptop, then either someone else was watching, or my dad had been closer to exposing her than I'd ever imagined. I didn't sleep. I just watched the sky lighten through my window and made a plan. I'd go back to the house. She was usually gone by 9 a.m., off to wherever she went, church, brunch, attention. I'd wait. Then I'd go in. I got there at 9:30. Her car was gone. I parked at the curb, heart pounding, palms sweaty against the steering wheel. This time, I didn't hesitate. I unlocked the door with the spare key under the garden frog, because some clichés are real, and stepped inside like I still belonged. The house was silent. But not empty. The smell hit me first: coffee. Fresh. Still warm. I froze in the doorway. She was home. Before I could move, I heard footsteps overhead. Fast. Then a voice. Hi, brittle, almost panicked. On the phone. I don't care what it says, he took it. I know he took it. Another pause. No. No, you don't understand, if it gets out. A muffled thud. Something dropped. A drawer? I backed up, into the hallway, heart hammering in my ears. She wasn't supposed to be here. None of this was supposed to happen now. But then I heard something else. Something that made the blood drain from my face. The sound of the old HP laptop powering up. She'd found it. I didn't think. I moved. Down the hallway, past the framed photos that looked like memories but felt like props, up the stairs that creaked the same way they had when I was a kid sneaking out past curfew. Each step was a drumbeat in my ears. She was in my old room. The door was ajar, just enough for me to see her hunched over the desk. The laptop sat in front of her, dusty, whirring, screen flickering with its ancient glow. Her fingers were stabbing at the keyboard like she didn't care if it cracked. I stayed in the shadow of the hallway. Watching. Listening. No. It's encrypted, she hissed into her phone. But he opened it. He saw something. I don't know what, he wouldn't tell me. A pause. Then she said my name. Not like a mother. Like a threat. He thinks I don't know what he's doing. That I didn't see him digging. But he forgets, I'm the one who taught him how to lie. I swallowed hard. She hadn't seen me yet. She was pacing now, one hand still on the desk, the other gesturing wildly with the phone. No. I'm not going to confront him. Not yet. He's emotional. He'll say something stupid. But I'll find out what he took. I always do. She stopped pacing. Leaned down to the screen. Clicked something. A soft chime echoed from the laptop, like a file opening. She whispered, "Got you." I stepped forward, slowly, careful not to breathe too loud. I wanted to see what she saw. I wanted to know. But then the floorboard gave under my foot. Just a whisper of a sound. She spun around. For a moment, she didn't speak. Just looked at me. Like she wasn't surprised. "Were you listening?" I didn't answer. She smiled. That same smile she used to give the neighbors. Sweet. Practiced. Poison. "Don't you knock anymore?" "What's on the laptop?" I asked, voice low. Her head tilted. "You wouldn't understand. Try me." She shut the laptop gently. Almost tenderly. Then straightened up and folded her arms like she was posing for a portrait. "Do you really think he was some poor little victim?" she said. "That I just waltzed in and ruined his perfect life?" I said nothing. She walked closer. Not rushed. Careful. Like she was trying not to spook a wild animal. "You know what he was when I met him," she said. "Lonely. Broke. Spinning stories about how he was going to fix his life. But he never did. Not really. I kept things together." I stared at her. "No," I said. "You kept control. That's all you ever cared about." She leaned in, her voice almost kind. "Almost. And you, my little golden boy. You think you're better because you changed his diapers and made his toast. You think that makes you a saint?" "It made me decent," I said. "Which is more than I can say for you." Her eyes flicked to my pocket. The notebook was there. She knew. "I'm guessing you found the box," she said softly. "I found everything." "Did you?" she asked. "Did you really?" And something in the way she said it, low, measured, stopped me cold. She wasn't shaken. She wasn't cornered. She was confident. Which meant, she still had something left to hold over me. She stepped back, picked up the laptop, and turned it so the screen faced me. One window was open. A file. No title. Just a string of numbers. But the image froze my blood. It was a screenshot of a message thread. Between my father and someone named C. The last message from my dad. "If anything happens to me, tell him the truth. He needs to know what she did. And what I did too." The reply. "I can't. He won't forgive you." She looked at me then, head tilted like a curious cat. "Still think you're ready for the whole story?" I didn't move. Because for the first time, I wasn't sure I was. I stared at the screen. That message thread was a heartbeat frozen in digital light, and mine was echoing against my ribs like it wanted to claw its way out. He knew something was coming. He'd been afraid of it. Not just her. Not just the years of bitterness and slow decay. He was afraid of what I'd find if I looked too close. What did he mean, what I did too? I asked, my voice dry as paper. She leaned on the desk, arms crossed, still calm. Too calm. You really want to know, she said. Because once you do, there's no going back to whatever version of him you've built in your head. Tell me. She shrugged. All right. But I'm not going to say it like it's some great confession. Because I stopped feeling bad about it a long time ago. She turned the laptop slightly and double-clicked another file. A video started to play. Grainy. Black and white. Dates stamped in the top corner, 2001. The garage again. My dad, thinner, younger, pacing in front of the camera. His movements were erratic, nervous. His hands kept going to his pockets, his head twitching to the side like he was listening for something. After a few seconds, a car engine faded into the background. Headlights swept through the garage windows. He froze. Then he spoke. I told her not to come back here. Another man's voice, off-screen. She said you changed your mind. I didn't. She's not safe here. He's not safe. The voice again, low and tight. You should have told him the truth back then. I couldn't, my dad said, voice cracking. It would have destroyed everything. The video skipped. Static. Then resumed. My dad now sat in a folding chair, head in his hands. She said she'd tell him if I didn't. Then came the last line before the video ended. I raised him like he was mine. That has to count for something. I reached for the desk to steady myself. Like he was mine. The room tilted, just slightly. My chest felt hollow. You weren't his, she said behind me, voice light, cruel in its ease. Not biologically. You figured that out already. But here's the part that really stings. He knew the whole time. I looked at her. You lied to him. From the start. She shrugged. No. I tested him. And he passed. He stayed. That's not the same thing. Isn't it? Her eyes narrowed. You think truth is this big, shining thing. But people only love the truth when it makes them look good. Your father built his identity on sacrifice. If I had told him he was free from the start, he'd have nothing left to hide behind. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the laptop through the window. But more than anything, I wanted the world to stop spinning long enough for me to understand what the hell was real. Who was he? I asked. My biological father. Daniel Price. That name, was it even real? She smirked. Real enough. Where is he? Gone. Left the state years ago. Last I heard he was in Arizona, married with kids. You were a complication. He wanted me to get rid of you. My stomach turned. Why didn't you? Because I wanted to matter to someone, she said, suddenly louder, sharper. I thought if I gave myself a second chance, a child, a house, a quiet life, I could make the screaming stop. I backed away, the old floor groaning under my heels. Did you ever love him? I asked. My dad? There was a pause. Not long. Just enough. I loved what he needed me to be. That silence settled like smoke. And then I walked away. Down the stairs. Through the hallway that had grown darker somehow. Out the front door into a sky smeared with clouds. I got into my car, shut the door, and gripped the wheel. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't start the engine. Everything I thought I knew was gone. My father wasn't my father. My mother was a stranger. And my own story felt like something someone else had written in pencil and left out in the rain. But one thing burned through the haze. The name from that message thread. C. Who was C? And why did they know what my father was afraid to tell me? I didn't go home. I drove aimlessly for an hour, two maybe, highways melting into backroads, the rhythm of tires on asphalt the only thing holding me together. My thoughts were a mess of static, fragments of her voice, his notebooks, the lies, the footage, that damn message thread. C, one letter. One initial that now felt like a loaded gun pressed to the back of everything I believed. Eventually I pulled into an empty parking lot outside an old diner I hadn't been to in years. The lights inside buzzed with that half-dead flicker, the kind of place where time felt soft around the edges. I sat in a booth by the window, ordered coffee I wouldn't drink, and opened my laptop. The USB drive was still warm from being in my pocket. I reopened the message thread, rereading my dad's final plea to C. Tell him the truth. It wasn't just about the paternity. That was the surface. There was something else. The replies were generic at first, hesitant, cagey. But the closer I looked, the more I realized there were patterns in the timestamps. The messages always came in the middle of the night. Between 1 and 4 a.m. whoever C was, they were hiding too. The last reply, dated just 2 weeks before my dad passed. He's already asking questions. If I tell him everything, he'll never forgive either of us. Either of us. I sat back in the booth. Let that echo. Us. Who was C protecting? I opened the metadata. Some files held more than text. Embedded in one thread was a string of location tags. A delivery IP. Partially masked, but not completely. I copied it into a tracking site. It resolved to a public Wi-Fi router. Nursing home. On the edge of town. Not where my father had ever stayed. But I knew the place. Willow Hills. A facility my dad once mentioned in passing. Said a friend lived there. He didn't give names. My heart started racing. I grabbed my keys. 30 minutes later, I was standing in front of a building that smelled like bleach and wintergreen, buzzing with the soft clatter of wheelchairs and old televisions. The receptionist looked up, startled. I'm looking for someone, I said. A resident. I think their first name starts with C. Maybe Charles. Or Carol. It's important. She frowned. Do you have a last name? No, I admitted. But they were in contact with my father. He passed away recently. His name was. I paused. I didn't know what to call him anymore. My father, I said. That's all that matters. She hesitated. Tapped a few keys on her computer. There's a Charles Donnelly, she said after a moment. He's been here 5 years. Doesn't get many visitors. Bingo. Can I see him? She gave me a look I couldn't read. You can try. He doesn't say much these days. I was buzzed through 2 doors and led down a narrow hallway that smelled like old paper and something metallic. Room 218. The nurse knocked once, then opened the door for me. He sat by the window, back straight, eyes glassy. Pale blue robe, thin shoulders. A paperback novel sat unopened in his lap. His head turned slowly as I entered. Mr. Donnelly? I asked, stepping forward. I think you knew my dad. He blinked. Once. Twice. Then something flickered in his expression. Name, he said, voice brittle as leaves. I told him. He closed his eyes. I knew you'd come. My throat tightened. You're C. He nodded. I sat across from him, heart thudding. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. Why didn't he? He looked out the window for a long time before answering. Because we both thought we were doing the right thing. And then, it was too late. For what? To undo it. He turned back to me. And there was something in his eyes, guilt, yes. But more than that. Fear. There's a file, he whispered. On that drive. Locked. Password's a date. What date? He took a shaky breath. The day your father stopped speaking to me. February 16, 2003. I froze. That was my 7th birthday. I didn't say goodbye. I couldn't. I just nodded, barely holding myself together, and left Charles sitting by the window, the afternoon sun turning his silhouette into a ghost's outline. The door clicked shut behind me, but the sound barely registered. My ears were ringing with one thing: February 16, 2003. My 7th birthday. The day my dad stopped speaking to Charles. The day, apparently, everything started coming undone. I drove straight home, ran every red light I could justify, heart pounding like it was trying to outpace whatever I was about to find. The second I got in the door, I grabbed the laptop, plugged in the USB, and opened the locked file. It prompted me for a password. I typed in 02162003. There was a pause. Then the folder cracked open. One file. A single video. I hovered the cursor over it, finger trembling, then double-clicked. The screen flickered. Home video. Grainy. Handheld. The camera was moving through the house, our house, but messy. Cluttered. Birthday balloons taped to doorways. My voice, small, excited, somewhere off-screen. Daddy, come look. Then another voice. Hers. Give me a second. I said I'm coming. The camera passed through the kitchen. Stopped. Zoomed slightly. She was at the table, sitting across from Charles Donnelly. Younger then. Nervous. Holding something, an envelope. She slid it across the table to him. This is the last time, she said, voice tense. He hesitated. He has a right to know. Not your call anymore. He's mine, too. No, she said flatly. You walked away. Don't crawl back just because the guilt's eating you alive. I could barely breathe. Charles stood up, knocking his chair back. I'll tell him myself if I have to. She smiled. Cold. Weaponized. If you do, I'll tell him what you did. The room went still. You wouldn't, he said quietly. Try me. She reached into her purse. Pulled out a single photo. Held it up to him, just enough for the camera to catch. The image was blurry, but I recognized my own face, small, confused. A hospital bed in the background. And a man I didn't know. You left him there, she hissed. Don't forget that. Charles looked broken. I thought he was better off, he said, sitting slowly. I didn't think. She cut him off. Exactly. You didn't think. So now you don't get a say. He said nothing more. Just got up and walked out of the frame. The camera stayed on her. She looked right into it. And smiled. Then the screen went black. I sat there, cold down to the bone, like all the air had been sucked out of the room. That one video, barely 4 minutes long, rewrote my entire childhood. There were 3 men in that room that day. And none of them had the whole truth. Not Charles. Not my dad. Not me. But she did. She had it all. And she used it like a knife. I stared at the black screen for what felt like hours, until finally I noticed something new on the desktop. Another folder. It hadn't been there before. Auto-extracted from the locked file. It was titled in all caps. Read me. Inside, only a document. I opened it. If you're seeing this, then you've done what I couldn't. You've opened the box. And now it's yours to carry. She lied to everyone, yes, but I lied to you too. I stayed silent when I should have fought. I chose peace over truth. And that makes me complicit. I'm sorry. For everything. The photo she showed Charles was real. You were in the ER. She left you there overnight. No one came back until morning. I didn't know until it was too late. I covered for her. Lied to social services. Said it was a mix-up. You were 7. You still smiled at her after. That smile broke me. My hands were shaking. I leaned back in the chair, dizzy, a cold sweat breaking over my neck. This was worse than neglect. Worse than abandonment. This was betrayal in layers. Every person who should have protected me had failed. And the one who tried, Charles, was silenced. By her. I sat in the dark and realized something that made my blood feel electric. She didn't just manipulate my dad. She rewrote all of us. And now, I was the only one left who could rewrite her back. The next morning, I did something I never thought I'd do. I made a list. Not of what she'd done, no, I already knew that, and it wouldn't fit on a page anyway. I made a list of names. People. Neighbors. Family friends. Former coworkers. Everyone who'd ever said to me, "Your mother is such a strong woman," or, "You're lucky to have someone like her." The ones she'd charmed, lied to, smiled at like butter wouldn't melt on her tongue. I sat on my kitchen floor, cold tile biting through my sweatpants, and wrote down every single one. Then I picked the top 5. 5 people whose opinions she cared about more than mine. People who thought they knew her. By noon, I was sending emails. Short. Direct. Attached to each, a copy of the hospital incident report, the video still of her threat to Charles, and the note from my father. No explanations. Just the truth. I didn't expect replies. But they came anyway. Fast. Some were stunned. One sent a single sentence, "I never liked the way she talked about him." Another said, "I'm so sorry." I believed her for years. But there was one reply that made my heart pound like it was trying to warn me. It read, "You're not the only one who's been waiting to burn it all down. Call me." Attached was a phone number. And the name. Sarah M. I stared at the name, unsure why it felt familiar. Then it hit me. Sarah was one of my mother's oldest friends. They used to go to coffee together every Thursday morning, back when I was still in middle school. I remembered her voice, husky, quick to laugh. I hadn't heard it in years. I called the number. It rang once. Twice. Then clicked. I was wondering how long it would take, she said. My throat went dry. "You knew?" "I knew enough to keep my mouth shut when I should have screamed," she said. "Your mother has a way of making people feel like truth is optional. Why didn't you say anything?" "I did," she said. "To your dad. Once. He told me it wasn't safe." That stunned me. "Not safe how?" Sarah paused. "You ever wonder why she always had control of the money?" she asked. "Why she convinced him to put everything in her name, even though it made no sense?" I didn't answer. She blackmailed him. Years ago. Had something on him. I never knew what. But it was bad enough that he never pushed back again. Not really. I remembered what Charles said. The hospital. The cover-up. It fit. Sarah kept going. I lost touch when she turned on me. Said I was planting seeds of doubt in your father's mind. That I was trying to break up her family. I left because I was scared. Scared of her? Scared of what she'd make other people believe about me. She's not violent. But she ruins people. Quietly. I believed her. Because I'd seen it. She did it to my dad. She tried to do it to Charles. And now, I could feel her circling me. I hadn't heard from her since the confrontation in my old room. That silence wasn't peace. It was preparation. "She's going to retaliate," I said. Sarah didn't hesitate. "She already is." "What?" "She called me this morning. Said you were spiraling. That you were digging into old things because you couldn't handle grief. She's building a case." My blood went cold. She's trying to discredit me. She's already started. You need to move fast. After I hung up, I didn't sit down. I didn't think. I acted. I went back into the files. Everything I had, Photos, video, the message thread, the recorded audio from the laptop mic. I organized it all. I wrote a document. Not a rant. Not revenge. Just the facts. A timeline. What happened? Who knew? What was hidden? And what that silence cost us. I attached it all. And I sent it to the funeral home director. The one who made me get her signature for my dad's cremation. The one she charmed. I sent it to the church where she cried through his memorial. To her book club. Her bridge group. Her job. I didn't say a word. I didn't sign it. But she would know exactly who it came from. The next morning, her voicemail was full. My inbox, dead quiet. I waited. Until 3:07 p.m. When I got the text. Just 5 words. You've made your choice. Fine. But it wasn't over. Not even close. Because an hour later, I got a letter. Handwritten. No return address. Inside, a single page. My name at the top. And a sentence that stopped my heart. There's still one thing she never told you. Ask about the basement. The letter shook in my hands. Ask about the basement. It was ridiculous. Stupid. The basement? That cluttered, dusty storage cave full of paint cans and old wrapping paper and a busted treadmill? That's where the rest of the truth was supposed to be. But I couldn't ignore it. Not after everything I'd already uncovered. So I drove. Back to the house. Again. For the last time, I told myself. The sky was overcast, hanging low like it knew what I was about to do. I parked down the street, heartbeat steady but sharp, like it was keeping time for something bigger than me. Her car wasn't in the driveway. Still, I knocked. Waited. Nothing. I used the key. The house was silent. Like it had already disowned both of us. The basement door was where it always had been, just off the kitchen, behind a warped white door with a rusty knob. It stuck when I pulled it, groaning like it didn't want to open. It was colder than I remembered. And darker. I flipped the light. That awful yellow bulb buzzed overhead, casting long shadows across the uneven concrete floor. Everything was still there, boxes marked Christmas, a deflated inflatable Santa, plastic bins filled with clothes that hadn't fit me since 3rd grade. I stood at the bottom step and whispered, "Okay." Then I started searching. Every box. Every bin. Every drawer in the old metal tool chest that still smelled faintly of oil and mothballs. Nothing. I checked the shelves lining the back wall. Books. Moldy paperbacks. Some VHS tapes. Nothing. Then, behind the furnace, something caught my eye. A panel. Wooden. Too clean. It didn't match the wall around it. I got closer. Reached for the edge. There was no handle. Just a seam. But when I pressed on the right side, it shifted. Hinges. It opened outward with a creak. Behind it, a crawlspace. No lights. Just dirt. Cobwebs. Cold air that felt like it hadn't moved in years. And something buried beneath a faded blue tarp. My skin turned to ice. I crawled in. My hands sank into the dry, cracked earth as I pulled the tarp back. Underneath. Not bodies. Not bones. Boxes. Taped. Stained. Labeled in a handwriting I hadn't seen since childhood. 4A. A, for me. I opened the first one. Inside, letters. Dozens. Hundreds. Each addressed to me. Each unopened. Each from my father. He wrote to me. Over and over. For years. I sat there on the dirt floor, pulled one out at random, and read. You were 4 today. You told me you wanted to be a mailman so you could give everyone happy news. I hope when you're older, someone gives you my news. I want you to know I see you. I see how kind you are. And I hope, one day, you understand why I couldn't tell you everything. I opened another. I saw the way she talked to you today. Like you were a burden. You're not. You're the best thing I ever had. I promise. And another. I tried again today. Told her I'd leave. Said I wanted to take you. She threatened to say I hit her. That I'd never see you again. So I stayed. I stayed for you. I couldn't read anymore. I couldn't even breathe. He tried. He fought. And she kept these from me. Hid them in dirt and dark, like if she buried enough of him, I'd forget he was ever real. I stayed there for hours, reading, crying, laughing sometimes at the dumb little doodles he'd drawn in the margins. A whole version of my dad, the real him, preserved in ink and paper and pain. Eventually, I found a small black notebook at the bottom of the last box. Inside, an entry dated the week before he died. I think she suspects I've been leaving things behind. I've hidden what I can. If you're reading this, you found it. You were always the one I hoped would. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from all of her. But maybe now, you can protect yourself. I left the basement with all the boxes. Loaded them into my car with shaking hands. I didn't care if she saw me. I wanted her to. Because now, I had every piece. Every file. Every message. Every word she tried to erase. And I wasn't done. I didn't sleep that night. I lined the letters up across my living room floor, like a paper trail of all the things I was never supposed to know. His handwriting changed over the years. The early ones were neater, like he still believed there was time. Toward the end, they grew frantic. Scribbled. Some had tear marks in the corners. A few had small brown smudges, coffee, I hoped. But I read every single one. He was never perfect. He said that over and over. He had moments where he resented her, moments he resented me for being the reason he stayed. But the truth that lived between those lines, the quiet, desperate truth, was love. All he ever wanted was for me to be safe. To know he cared. And she made damn sure I never did. By morning, my hands ached from sorting and scanning. I digitized the letters, compiled them into a chronological file, and paired them with his notebook entries, video clips, even the recordings from the USB drive. I formatted it all into a document, 273 pages of silence breaking. Then I sent it. To everyone. Her friends, her colleagues, the church. The hospice coordinator. The funeral home. The local paper. Even the HOA. I made it impossible to ignore. By the end of the day, the calls started. One from a reporter who thought it was fiction until I emailed him a scanned copy of the hospital report. One from a hospice nurse who told me, quietly, she had always wondered why she wasn't allowed to check in on him without her hovering nearby. But the one call I didn't expect came from her. Blocked number. I shouldn't have picked up. But I did. I held the phone to my ear, silent. Her voice was calm. Ice underneath. I see what you're doing. I didn't answer. You think you're noble. That you're standing up for him. But all you're doing is embarrassing yourself. Still, I said nothing. You think these people care, she continued. They don't. They'll look. They'll whisper. Then they'll forget. And you'll still be bitter. Alone. Digging up corpses no one asked for. At that, I laughed. One sharp, bitter sound. I'm not doing this for them, I said. I'm doing it so when you walk into a room full of your little lies, you'll never know who knows the truth. There was a pause. Then, almost softly, she said, I was always better at this than you. And hung up. I stared at the phone for a long time. She wasn't shaken. She wasn't even mad. She was calculating. That meant she still had a card to play. And I wasn't about to sit around waiting to find out what it was. I needed to find her weakest link. Someone she had lied to. Controlled. Used. So I called Sarah again. I think she's going to try to flip this on me, I said. Make it look like I'm unstable. She already is, Sarah replied. She's spreading around that you've been drinking. That you've always had episodes. That you're misremembering things. I laughed, but it didn't feel funny. She's good. Sarah hesitated. She's scared. No. She's cornered. That's different. There was silence on the line. Then Sarah said, "There's something you should see." She sent me an email with an attachment. A video file. I clicked play. It was old. Fuzzy. Looked like it had been transferred from VHS. The image flickered, then focused on a backyard barbecue. Kids running through sprinklers. Adults laughing. Holding drinks. The camera zoomed in on a table. My dad and Sarah were seated beside each other, talking quietly. Then my mother walked into the frame. She smiled at them. Hugged Sarah. And in the background, my dad's face fell. He looked afraid. That's when I realized, this wasn't just a random home video. This was the day my father tried to leave. Sarah's voice came through on the audio, barely above the hum of the party. "You don't have to go back with her, you know." And his answer was so soft, it took me a second to catch it. "I can't." She said she'd ruin me. And no one would believe me. It was like watching a ghost. And suddenly I knew exactly how to end this. I didn't sleep again. There was too much buzzing in my head. That video Sarah sent, just a few quiet seconds, said more than 1,000 documents ever could. His voice. His eyes. The way he shrank when she entered the frame. He was terrified. Not of violence. Not of being left. Of not being believed. That was her real power. She made her victims invisible in plain sight. And it worked. For decades. Until now. By the next morning, the story had already spread. Someone leaked the document publicly. It landed in a local blog, then jumped to a community Facebook group, and by noon, it was the thing everyone was whispering about at the grocery store and pretending not to read on their phones during Sunday service. She went quiet. No calls. No texts. No cryptic emails or blocked number threats. Just silence. It was worse than yelling. Because it meant she was planning something. So I planned first. I made 3 calls that afternoon. First, to Sarah. I asked her to come with me. Second, to Charles Donnelly. He didn't speak at first when I told him what I was doing, but then he said softly, "I'll be there. It's time." Third, to the funeral director. The same man who looked me in the eye and asked for her signature, like her word was holy. I told him everything. He didn't deny he knew something was wrong. Just said, if I had any idea it went that deep. I told him he'd be receiving a request. To update the obituary. He said quietly, "You've got my approval." Then it was time. We met at her house. I didn't call ahead. I wasn't going to give her time to script. Sarah parked behind me. Charles arrived 5 minutes later, escorted by a nurse who waited outside with the engine running. I knocked. The door opened slowly. And there she was. Perfect as ever. Lipstick on. Hair curled. Blouse freshly pressed, like she was on her way to charm her way through someone else's dinner party. She froze when she saw the 3 of us. "What is this?" she asked, smile barely slipping. "Conversation," I said. "In front of people who don't believe you anymore." Charles stepped forward. She looked at him with a mix of disdain and something new, fear. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "No," he said. "But I am. And I remember." I handed her a folder. Inside, a printout of the letters. The photos. A copy of the video with Sarah. The scanned notebook. All of it. You can either let me speak, or I'll read it to the neighborhood from the driveway, I said. She said nothing. So I spoke. I told her everything I'd found. What my father left behind. What she took. I read the hospital report out loud, word for word. Her jaw twitched, but she didn't stop me. I read the last note from my father. The one where he wrote that he stayed quiet because he was afraid no one would believe him over her. And when I looked up, she wasn't smiling anymore. She just looked small. I'm not here to scream, I said. I'm not even here to hurt you. I'm here to take away the one thing you used to keep us all quiet, your image. Your story. That false halo you wrapped yourself in every time someone got too close. She opened her mouth, probably to spin, deflect, deny, but Charles interrupted. You hurt him. You hurt us. And no one's afraid of you anymore. Then Sarah stepped forward, voice calm. Controlled. Devastating. I've got a letter prepared for your church. Your employer. And if you so much as breathe a lie about him again, I will stand up during service and read every one of his letters out loud. Do you understand me? That did it. Her face cracked. Just a flicker. No rage. No sobbing. Just collapse. Like the scaffolding had finally come down. You don't know what I gave up, she whispered. You gave up nothing, I said. You stole everything. We left her there. In the doorway. Alone. By the time I got home, the new obituary was live. Clean. Honest. His story, in his words. No mention of her. Just him. And me. It arrived 2 days later. No postmark. No stamp. Just an unmarked white envelope slid under my front door sometime between morning and noon. I thought it might be from her, one last gasp, a bitter note to claw back control. But when I opened it, the handwriting wasn't hers. It was his. My father's. I recognized it instantly. Slanted slightly to the left, narrow loops, the R.S. always taller than they needed to be. The envelope held a single letter. Folded neatly. I sat down before I read it, because I already knew whatever was inside, it would be the real ending. Or maybe the real beginning. If this ever reaches you, it means you found the truth. Maybe not all of it, but enough. I hope it didn't break you. That wasn't the point. I know what I looked like to you. Passive. Weak. A man who stayed when he should have run. A man who didn't protect his child the way he should have. And you're not wrong. But there's one thing I want you to know, without doubt. I loved you so hard it made me cowardly. I stayed because I thought, in some warped way, that keeping the peace was the same as keeping you safe. I know now I was wrong. I should have fought harder. I should have screamed. But I left you breadcrumbs, didn't I? Little pieces I hoped you'd follow. I hid them where she wouldn't find them. She had the power, yes, but you had something she never did. Curiosity. You never stopped asking. You never stopped digging. I hope that part of you stays intact. If there's anything you take from all this, let it be this. Her story ends with silence. Yours begins with truth. I'm proud of you. There was no date. No signature. Just the ink fading at the edges, like even the paper couldn't hold the weight of what was written. I didn't cry. Not then. I folded it back into the envelope, stood up, and walked into my father's old room, the guest room, now, where the sunlight hit the bookshelf at just the right angle. And I placed the letter between the pages of his favorite book. The one he read 3 times and never explained why. He always said stories lived on if you gave them a place to rest. So I gave his a resting place. And then I breathed. For the first time in what felt like years, I just breathed. The calm lasted all of 5 days. I tried to pretend it was over. I even cooked. Cleaned the house. Opened windows. Let air touch the walls again. I told myself I could move on now, that the worst had passed, and the silence wasn't ominous this time. It was earned. But then the envelope came. This one didn't come under the door. It was left on my windshield. Tucked neatly beneath the wiper. Pale blue. Thick, expensive paper. My name written in perfect cursive, the kind that felt practiced. Performed. I knew that handwriting. I hadn't seen it in over 20 years, but I recognized it instantly. My aunt. My mother's sister. I hadn't thought about her in years. She'd vanished from our lives sometime after I turned 9. I was told she moved to another state. That she needed distance. No one ever said from what. I never thought to question it. I opened the envelope in the kitchen, hands already shaking. Inside, a single sheet. No greeting. No emotion. I've seen what you've done. I stayed away all these years for a reason, but it looks like you finally opened the door that needed opening. If you want the rest of the story, the part no one else will give you, meet me. Sunday. 10 a.m. Bennett's Diner. Corner booth. Come alone. I reread it 3 times. And still, it made no sense. Why now? What could she possibly have to add? But my gut already knew. My mother didn't just rewrite my father's life. She rewrote her own. Which meant someone out there had the original draft. And it might be my aunt. So I went. Sunday morning. 9:58 a.m. The diner was nearly empty. The kind of place with plastic menus and booths that stuck to your legs in the summer. The scent of burnt coffee clung to the air. She was already there. Gray sweater. Black sunglasses. Hair tied back like she didn't want to be seen, even here. She looked older, but not frail. Sharper. Like every year away from my mother had carved her into something more dangerous. You came, she said, sliding a mug toward me. Black, no sugar. You used to drink it from your dad's cup when he wasn't looking. I didn't sit. Why now? She motioned for me to sit. Waited. Then she said, because I thought the truth might die with him. But it didn't. You dragged it out of the dirt. I sat. And she leaned in. What do you remember about the year you turned 6? I blinked. That was the year the dog died. We didn't go on vacation. She said we couldn't afford it. She nodded slowly. You remember the night you had that asthma attack? Ended up in the ER? I froze. Barely, I said. Dad said it was the weather. No, she said, voice low. It was her. She left the windows open. After spraying bleach through the house. Then locked the bedroom door. My mouth went dry. She called me after, my aunt continued. Terrified. But not about you. About him. She was convinced he was going to leave her. Said she needed help making sure no one took her son away. She used that, I whispered. More than that, she said. She built her identity around being needed. Desperately. So she created situations where she had to be the center. My hands were fists in my lap. Why didn't you stop her? I tried, she said. I went to child services. Gave them everything I had. But she spun it. Said I was jealous. Unstable. She filed a restraining order. Claimed I was stalking you. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She cut you out. Cleanly. Strategically. It wasn't just about control. It was about image. She knew how to frame a narrative. And she convinced your father that letting me near you would only make things worse. Did he believe her? For a while, she said. But not forever. That's when he started leaving the letters. I sat back, dizzy. She always told me you ran, I said. That you left the family because you couldn't handle her. She snorted. I left because I knew her. And I was tired of pretending I didn't. I stared at her. What now? I asked. Is this it? Is there anything else? She hesitated. Then pulled a small notebook from her bag. Handwritten. Tattered. This, she said, sliding it across the table, is her journal. I didn't touch it. She kept one. Not for long, my aunt said. But long enough. I opened the first page. The very first line read. Sometimes I think I only had him to make someone need me. Not love. Just dependence. I didn't read it at the diner. I couldn't. Just holding it made my stomach knot up, like the ink might bleed through my hands and poison everything I'd built since she lost her grip on me. But I thanked my aunt. She told me to be careful. Not with my mother, with myself. Reading her words. It'll change how you remember yours. I didn't get it then. But I do now. At home, I cleared the table. Sat under the kitchen light. Laid the journal down like it might start screaming. If I didn't. The cover was soft, worn, cracked at the spine. I opened it slowly. Page 1. Her handwriting was neater than my father's. Crisp. Exact. Like even her secrets had to be well kept. There are things I think that I know not to say out loud. Not because they're wrong. But because they'd make people look at me differently. She wasn't writing to anyone. No, dear diary, no pretense of innocence. Just thought. Cold and private. When I met him, he smiled like he didn't know how. It was pitiful. I liked that. Men like that are easy to own. I froze. Read it again. He asked if I believed in soulmates. I said yes. I lied. I believe in leverage. And he gave me plenty. I kept reading. Each page was worse than the last. One was about the day I was born. The nurses kept handing him the baby. I had to fake the fatigue just to get them to back off. He kept crying. So dramatic. I remember wondering what I had just signed up for. Another entry, my second birthday. He bought a little cake and sang so softly I could barely hear. I felt embarrassed. Not for him. For myself. What kind of woman ends up with a man who gets emotional over a child blowing out candles? Page after page, year after year. She recorded everything. But not like a mother would. Like a scientist, dissecting a lab rat. Observing weakness. Cataloging control. Sometimes I'd make him think I was leaving. Just to watch him beg. It reminded me I still had value. I nearly threw the book across the room. But I couldn't. Because I wasn't finished. I reached the final quarter. That's when it changed. He started hiding things. I think he's writing letters. I found one in the closet behind the suit jackets. Pathetic little scribble. Told himself he'd give it to our son someday. I burned it. He cried and said nothing. Of course he didn't fight. He never fights. Then this. I've been thinking lately that when he goes, I'll be free. But the boy worries me. He's too much like his father. Always watching. Quiet. Soaking things in. Quiet ones are dangerous. She knew. Even back then. I kept turning pages. And then, right near the end, I found it. A single page. Short. One line. If he ever turns on me, I'll tell him the truth. The full thing. He won't recover from it. That was it. No context. No clue what she meant. Just that chilling sentence. It sat on the page like a knife waiting to be picked up. The truth. The full thing. What didn't I know? I closed the journal. My heart was racing again. A part of me wanted to be done. To call it over. To walk away from all this and let her rot in her silence. But I couldn't. Because she wasn't bluffing. There was something else. Something final. And now, I had to decide. Do I walk away? Or go ask her what she meant? I told myself I wouldn't go. I shouldn't go. That I didn't need her to finish the story, because I'd already finished it without her. But that sentence from her journal dug under my skin like a splinter I couldn't stop touching. If he ever turns on me, I'll tell him the truth. The full thing. He won't recover from it. She meant me. And whatever truth she was holding on to, it wasn't just a threat. It was insurance. So I went. Not to heal. Not to reconcile. Just to end it, once and for all. She still lived in the same house. The one my dad bought. The one she twisted into a shrine for her own myth. When she opened the door, she didn't look surprised. She looked ready. Back for more, she said, voice syrupy. No games, I told her. I read the journal. The last entry. I want to know what it meant. She didn't even blink. Just stepped aside and said, then come in. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and artificial lavender. Same as always. Everything in its place, as if chaos had never touched these walls. But I knew better now. It had never left. She sat in her favorite chair. The one by the fireplace. The same place she used to pretend to grieve after my father passed, arms folded like a widow in a painting, eyes dry. I didn't sit. I'm only going to ask once, I said. What truth? She looked at me for a long time. Then said, softly, you really want it? I wouldn't be here if I didn't. She exhaled, slow. Like she was finally allowed to breathe after holding something in for years. You weren't supposed to be his, she said. It hit me like a slap I never saw coming. What? You weren't supposed to be his. You were supposed to be someone else's. I was leaving him. I had someone. But then the test came back, and I panicked. I felt my legs trying to sit but refusing. She kept going. He begged me to stay. Of course he did. And I knew if I told him it wasn't his, he'd walk. That was the one thing he wouldn't forgive. I opened my mouth. Closed it. I couldn't speak. So I lied, she said. Said it was his. He clung to it like a drowning man. Gave up everything to believe it. Even himself. I stumbled back a step. No, I said. He knew. He had to know. He wouldn't. He wondered, she said. He had doubts. That's why he stayed. Because doubt can be shaped. Molded. If I cried hard enough, acted scared enough, he'd shut the door on it. Every time. You're lying. I'm not. Why now? She stood. Walked toward me. Eyes sharp. Flat. Because you came here for the truth, and I never bluff. This was always your ace. Your righteous little mission. But that man you've been mourning? She leaned in. He might not have been your father at all. My pulse screamed in my ears. I wanted to hit something. To scream. To walk out and never look back. But I didn't move. I watched her sit down again, calmly folding her hands in her lap like she'd just offered me a glass of water and not a wound I'd carry for the rest of my life. Why tell me this? I whispered. Because now you get to wonder. Just like he did. And wondering, sweetheart? Her smile was small. Cruel. It rots people. I didn't say goodbye. Didn't slam the door. Didn't scream. I just walked out. Got in my car. And sat. For a long, long time. I didn't go home right away. I drove around for an hour. Maybe more. The streets blurred into one long gray smear: gas stations, strip malls, places I used to pass as a kid without realizing I'd one day circle them in search of something like clarity. But there was no clarity. Only that sentence echoing in my head. You weren't supposed to be his. I parked in front of my dad's old hardware store. It's been closed for years, gutted, the sign half torn off, vines climbing the sides like the building itself was trying to disappear. But I sat there, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing tethering me to the version of myself I'd known until 10 minutes ago. What was I supposed to do with this? Get a test? Prove her right? Prove her wrong? Would it even change anything? I closed my eyes. All I could see was him. Sitting on the porch in the fall, wrapping my fingers around a hot mug of cocoa he made too sweet, because I liked it that way. Lifting me onto his shoulders at the county fair so I could see the fireworks. Singing, badly, over the radio while driving me to school when I was too tired to be embarrassed. He was there. Every time. And she wasn't. So what did biology even mean? Still, I had to know. Not because I doubted what we had. But because she wanted me to. She planted the seed and expected it to grow into doubt. Into rot. And I wasn't going to let her win. I booked the test. Saliva. Mail-in. It felt ridiculous. Cold. Mechanical. Like trying to reduce a life to strands and percentages. The wait nearly killed me. Every time the phone buzzed, I thought it was the result. When it finally came, 11 days later, I sat in the hallway outside my bedroom, still in yesterday's clothes. My heart was doing that thing again, pounding like it was trying to get out ahead of the truth. I clicked the link. Opened the report. Read the first line. And laughed. Out loud. It was his. My father. No doubts. No surprises. No footnotes. My throat closed up. I sat there for a long time. Crying. Laughing. Somewhere in between. Because all this time, she thought she could rewrite everything. Manipulate the narrative. Plant poison and call it care. Feed me lies like they were medicine. But she got one thing wrong. He knew. Maybe not through tests or science or hard evidence. But he knew in his bones. In his heart. And that's why he stayed. Why he wrote those letters. Why he fought without fighting. Because he was my father. And I was his son. No version of the past, not hers, not the one she manufactured to keep us both in the dark, could change that. I didn't call her. I didn't text. I didn't send the test results or rub the truth in her face like I knew she'd expected me to. Because that would have meant she still had some hold over me. And she didn't. Not anymore. But there was something I did need to do. Because for all the years she spent warping the narrative, controlling the script, building her victim story brick by brick, I had something she'd never prepared for. Her own words. The journal. The video clips. The voicemails I'd forgotten I had saved. Messages where she'd spiral late at night, forgetting to keep the mask on. Admitting things in half-truths, veiled threats, twisted memories. And I still had the files from my father. The letters. The recordings. The notebook. I compiled it all, cut it together like a documentary, but raw. Unpolished. I didn't need slick editing or dramatic music. I let the words speak for themselves. I opened with his voice. A clip from one of the tapes. If you're hearing this, I guess I didn't make it out. But maybe you did. And if you did, God, I hope you tell the truth. Because I spent too long living someone else's. Then I cut to her journal. Lines read aloud in my voice. Men like that are easy to own. Sometimes I'd make him think I was leaving. Just to watch him beg. He might not have been your father at all. Then I layered in the evidence. Photos of the letters. Hospital reports. Screenshots of emails she sent to friends, playing the grieving wife while my father was still alive and begging for someone, anyone, to see what was really going on. I kept my narration minimal. Just enough to string the pieces together. At the end, I included the DNA test result. One line, no commentary. Then silence. And finally, her voice. That last phone call. You think these people care? They don't. They'll look. They'll whisper. Then they'll forget. And you'll still be bitter. Alone. Digging up corpses no one asked for. I paused the audio there. Then added my final words. She was right about one thing. People do forget. Unless you remind them. I uploaded it anonymously. I didn't put my name. Didn't ask for credit. I just let it spread. And it did. Fast. The community forum picked it up first. Then local groups. Former neighbors started sharing it. One person sent it to her church. Another posted it in a caregiving support group. Within 2 days, it had over 30,000 views. She went silent. No posts. No calls. No curated social updates with filtered grief. Just vanished. And that was the point. Because she couldn't bury the truth anymore. Not when it was playing on 1,000 screens, in her own voice, with her own handwriting. Not when it was her, unmasked. It came on a Tuesday. Ordinary, quiet. Gray sky, soft breeze, coffee half full kind of day. The kind of day that doesn't ask anything from you. Until it does. The letter was in my mailbox, real envelope, real stamp. Not email. Not a text. It had my name written in delicate cursive, with a return address I didn't recognize. But the name hit me like a thunderclap. Margaret Holloway. My dad's first love. He mentioned her once. Quietly. Almost accidentally. Said they dated for a while in college, but life got in the way. Said she was kind. That she listened. That's all I ever knew. Until now. I stood in my kitchen and opened the letter like it might shatter in my hands. Dear ____________. I don't expect you to know who I am, but I knew your father before he met your mother. We were young. Just kids, really. We met in Intro to Philosophy. He hated the professor. I adored him. That was our first fight. We laughed the whole way through it. I never stopped thinking about him. Years later, we ran into each other again. Briefly. It was after you were born. He told me he was a father. That he'd named you himself. And I saw something in his face I'd never seen before. Exhaustion wrapped in love. He was proud, but tired. I asked how he was doing, and he just smiled and said, "I'm learning how much love can hurt." I didn't understand what he meant then. I do now. I saw your video. A friend sent it to me, not knowing I knew him. And I want to say thank you. For giving him back to the world. For letting people see the real man I remember, the one who kept everything close to the chest but loved so deeply it nearly drowned him. I cried watching it. I'm crying writing this. Because the man in those recordings? That was him. The quiet, thoughtful, soft-hearted man who apologized even when you stepped on his foot. And because of you, the truth is no longer buried. You made sure of that. I hope you find peace in the wreckage. You deserve to. With love. Margaret. I stood at the sink, staring out the window, holding that letter like it was made of something fragile and holy. Because after everything, the damage, the lies, the unraveling, here was this woman, from a different life. And she saw him. Really saw him. Not the way my mother painted him. Not the way grief twisted him. But as he was. Whole. Kind. Quiet. Good. I folded the letter and slipped it inside his book, the same one where I'd placed his final note. The one he read 3 times and never explained why. And this time, I understood. He wasn't just clinging to hope. He was leaving breadcrumbs. He knew that someday, someone would piece it all together. And I had. Not just for him. But for me. Because his story wasn't about how it ended. It was about who told it. And now, it was mine. I stood in that quiet kitchen. Sun pouring in. Window open. And for the first time in my life, I felt something settle deep in my chest. Not closure. Not revenge. Just truth. And truth? It didn't need to shout. It just needed to be free.